weekend of December 4th here in Dubai at COP28. This enigmatic conference has brought to surface many positive developments on a number of climate fronts, while simultaneously demonstrating that the global body of climate professionals have their work cut out for them. Whether it's through side events, direct meetings, pavilion panels, or other forms of engagement, Canada's cities and regions have been hard at work not just to promote our current progress, but to sincerely look at what else we could be doing, what else we need to be doing to move quicker, what we need to bring back home. So today, let's talk climate finance.
My name is Jude Crasta, and I lead the Cities and Climate Initiative at the Morris J. Wass Center for Dialogue at Simon Fraser University in Vancouver. I am your host for our series of virtual briefings throughout COP28. If you're new, our initiative has been doing briefings from COP since the Glasgow Summit in 2021. While we usually do these live, the UAE has a 12-hour time difference with Vancouver, 9 hours with Ottawa. So, we thought we'd bring you a recorded report series that you can view at your convenience. We would like to thank you for taking the time to watch this, wherever you are. Throughout these briefings, we will be doing a quick recap of the events that have taken place throughout the thematic days at COP. We will also feature one or more speakers who will be able to quickly share their thoughts on multi-level climate action at this Dubai conference.
So at the end of Finance, Gender, Trade, and Accountability Day, here at COP28, there have been discussions about newer financing vehicles, arguments made in support of integrating public and private capital, an assessment of the structures in place to protect public assets, and interests within the context of greater involvement of that private capital, and contents of that nature. For example, among the many events that have taken place, Minister Stephen Guilbeault had the opportunity to speak at an official side event with Matthias Cormann, the Secretary General of the OECD, and was focusing on the need for scaling up climate financing for adaptation projects. There was also an emphasis from the panel in that event that no one solution would be sufficient alone, and that a diversification of finance flows would be necessary, in addition to volume itself. When it comes to Canada's cities and regions and the civil society community that supports multi-level climate action, we decided to get some perspective about the goings-on at the Finance Day here. So we sat down with Ana Gonzalez Guerrero of CAANZero at the Mars Discovery District in Toronto to learn more. So we're joined today by Ana Gonzalez Guerrero of CAANZero at the Mars Discovery District. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Jude.
So, Ana, let's start things off. First things first, climate finance. What are some of the developments you're keeping an eye out for at COP?
Yeah, so today is day 5 at COP28, and it's finance, trade, gender, and accountability day, which means that there's a lot of side events and just possibly announcements and things happening around finance. But the reality is that it's not just today, but finance is at the crux of the Paris Agreement. We call it paying for Paris. So we're not going to reach our climate goals, both on mitigation and adaptation, without knowing how we're going to pay for it. So really every day is kind of Finance Day at COP, and you keep hearing about the developments. Things that I'm keeping an eye out, a few, and without boring folks, I think one of the key elements this year will be Article 2.1c of the Paris Agreement, which, and I'm going to read this one, is seeking to make financing flows consistent with a pathway towards low greenhouse gas emissions and climate resilient development. And I can almost anticipate your question around why this is relevant for Canadians and Canadian cities, but we are essentially, what we're asking, or what 2.1c is trying to do, is define and operationalize how we increase good investments or green investments, so energy retrofits, green bonds, whatever you want to call it, and how we decrease financing of bad or inconsistent and incompatible investments with the Paris Agreement, namely fossil fuels. This year, amongst other things, Article 2.1c will be hopefully better defined on how it's going to be operationalized, how it interacts with the global stocktake, which is one of the big elements of COP28, and how it interacts with other climate goals and climate objectives. So back to Canada, what this would mean is that, I mean, we already have a lot of work going on this. Senator Rosa Galvez, who is at COP28, has been pushing for a very progressive bill, the Climate Alliance Finance Act, that is seeking to better define and delimitate what can and cannot be done for Canadian banks and financial institutions in terms of investments that are aligned with our net zero goals. Again, what does this mean? And kind of like trickle it down. The more investments, the more that investments free up for green or better investments in infrastructure, the more Canadian cities can access capital for the projects that we do need to do. And at the same time, the less we invest on fossil fuels and other non-green elements, the more we can actually avoid the worst of the climate impacts that we have.
Perfect. So I know you've already talked a bit about like what this means for folks back at home and some of your work there. Were there other areas within climate finance that you're also looking at that relate to your work?
Yes, maybe I'll introduce a little bit about my work and then some of the areas that we've been hearing a lot about. But I'm working with Mars Discovery District on piloting CAANZero, the Climate Action Accelerator for Net Zero. And this is seeking to work with small and medium Canadian cities to aggregate energy retrofit projects into a portfolio of bankable, investable solutions that then can go to private sector. So what we're doing here is putting together, aggregating on the supply side and the demand side to hopefully eliminate the barriers of the financial flows, like I was describing before, reaching or going from banks to cities. What we'll be doing is working with a cohort of municipalities on how to demystify and address the challenges of accessing private capital, and we'll also be working with the private capital side to be able to pool money together with some concessional finance as well, and kind of make those match to hopefully increase the investment in energy retrofit projects for small and medium Canadian cities. So with that in mind, I'm seeing a lot of talk around blended finance mechanisms such as CAANZero and other financing vehicles that are being talked about on the ground here at COP. And it is pretty exciting, and there's a sense of pride that we're already doing a lot of that in Canada, not just through CAANZero, but a number of other important cities and organizations such as the Atmospheric Fund, the LC3 Centers have been talking about and working on developing these type of solutions that attract and mobilize private capital for municipalities in ways that are also being kind of explored and talked about here, and we're able to showcase some of that Canadian innovation and the cities that are like pretty forward thinking in Canada doing some of this work.
Right, so you're talking about these new financing vehicles and new solutions and everything. There's a lot Canada's demonstrating on the world stage. What are some of the types that have caught your attention over here?
There's a lot of conversation, and I think this is important to tie back to the 2.1c article that I was talking about, but there's a lot of conversation on mobilizing private capital for both mitigation and adaptation. Yesterday we sat down in a panel with Minister Guilbeault talking about scaling private capital for adaptation, and the reason why I bring this up is I think it is highly important to mobilize and redirect financial flows from the private sector to green solutions like I was describing earlier. But this should not be a get out of jail card for public sector. Private sector will only be investing if governments, both at the local, provincial, and national level, are creating the enabling environment that does attract that type of investment, both by investing themselves in these type of solutions, but also by just providing the right policy and regulatory frameworks that make that a safer investment for the private sector. So we should not get distracted and say, well, now if private sector is going to be participating, public sector can take a step back. It's a yes and. It's both need to be coordinating and building the partnerships that are really pivotal in addressing and mobilizing all sources of capital to what I would say the greatest challenge of our lifetime, which is climate solutions on the ground.
Interesting. Emphasizing your point on it's not an either or, it's a yes and conversation over there. So shifting a little, I was chatting with Mayor Mike Savage of Halifax the other day. It was for our first briefing video. We had talked about the need for keeping it real with folks in our communities. Back home, there is a housing crisis, a cost of living crisis. people are generally uncertain about future economic development. How do you think climate financing for community action can benefit people on the ground?
I think that's a very important question, and something that a lot of the grassroots movement reminds us at COP and back at home is there's no climate justice without social justice. We cannot see these problems as separate, and they will only move forward together and if they're interconnected. So to me, a lot of the work that we are thinking of and doing needs to be considering the co-benefits of doing a climate project. So I'll ground it in an example, but for CAANZero, we're dealing with primarily mitigation and energy retrofit projects. But for us, it's important to also add some sprinkles of adaptation. How are we considering resilience in these deep energy retrofits? There's also a conversation that we're hoping to be able to integrate, which is accessibility. So how can, if you're going to go into a building and do a deep energy retrofit, how can you not only consider how that might be a resilience hub for the community later on, but how you're making it more accessible for folks to enter and just be able to participate in anything related to a municipally owned building.
So, Dubai is far away from home. COP can often be out of sight, out of mind for almost everyone in communities in Canada. What's the one key message you want people to hear loud and clear from your experience at COP?
Yeah, I think it's important to recognize and remember that even if it feels very far, what happens here does impact communities back at home. An example of that, and tying it back to the finance question, 2.1c would define how financial flows are more aligned with the Paris Agreement. Something like that could really set the tone for the bill that I mentioned from Senator Galvez to get momentum and action and traction in Canada. And that in itself would also help programs like CAANZero, for example, be the practical and scalable solution to be an option for green investment that is providing capital for cities themselves. So while it feels like a long way to go, these policy decisions are important in the way that they set the tone and can mobilize and catalyze policy and finance all the way down to cities. That said, I think it's also important to recognize that this year has been very important for cities at COP. I've seen the conversation and the narrative evolve a lot in the last couple of years, from just players and implementers to key partners in the delivery of solutions and achievement of our goals. This year was the first Local Climate Action Summit, which I believe you talked about it in the other briefing. But it was front stage center for cities to be the key players that they already are in a space like this. So please just know that a lot of us are working hard to make sure that what cities are doing is not only represented here, but that what happens here genuinely impacts and positively the work that cities are already doing on the ground. And that, practically speaking, is hopefully going to translate in real policy and financing changes in a Canadian context that benefit cities trying to do climate solutions.
All right. Thank you so much, Ana, for taking the time to talk about climate finance with us. Hope the rest of your COP goes well, and we look forward to your comments, actually, when you join us on the panel on December 6th.
Yes, thank you so much.
Finance should be directed towards just transition projects that directly benefit women. And doing that without having women at the center is what will guarantee prosperity.
Folks, we are in the thick of COP28 with long run-on days, chaotic schedules, and a wealth of information being surfaced more than any person can probably keep track of. And throughout all the discussions here in Dubai, it's constantly at top of mind for everyone on how we can make this real for the folks back in our communities in Canada. Tomorrow, December 5th, is Energy, Just Transition, and Indigenous Peoples Day. And December 6th after that is Multilevel Action and Urbanization Day here at COP28. Don't forget to tune in after December 6th for our next briefing video. And for those on the ground here in Expo City, another reminder, don't forget to join us at the Canada Pavilion on December 6th at 10:30 a.m. for our panel on the role of multi-level climate action in integrating climate, economy, and land use. This event is hosted in partnership with the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, CAANZero of the Mars Discovery District, Sacred Earth Solar, and Renovate the Public Hearings Initiative at the SFU Center for Dialogue. You can follow for more updates and COP28 information on our website, citiesandclimate.ca/COP28-information. It'll appear in the link soon. And wherever you are across the globe watching this, we thank you for joining us, and we hope to see you at the next one.